Commander Jun Park stood with the other members of the human delegation, his back straight despite his exhaustion. The air aboard the Kreveshi warship felt too thick, the gravity slightly stronger than Earth standard. They had been touring the massive vessel for over 3 hours, and his diplomatic smile was beginning to strain. Admiral Tanak, a towering figure with molten gold skin and 6 eyes arranged in a hexagonal pattern, gestured toward another corridor with one of his 4 arms. And now, honored humans, the observation deck. From here, you may appreciate the true might of our Imperial fleet. Jun nodded politely, following the Admiral and his guards. The human delegation had been sent to establish peaceful relations with the Kreveshi Empire, a species that had expanded rapidly through 3 sectors in just 2 decades. Earth needed allies, not enemies. The observation deck was impressive, Jun had to admit. A vast chamber with transparent walls that curved overhead, creating the illusion of standing in open space. The stars shone brilliantly, and below them, the curve of a blue-green planet. Around it orbited dozens of Kreveshi warships, their hulls gleaming like polished bronze in the sunlight. Magnificent, murmured Lin, the chief diplomat, beside him. Jun was about to agree when something caught his eye. A flash of light reflecting off one of the nearby warships. He stepped closer to the transparent wall, squinting. There, attached to the hull of the vessel, was a humanoid figure. Jun blinked, sure he was seeing things. But no, there was definitely a being strapped to the exterior of the warship, a slender form with silvery blue skin that seemed to shimmer faintly against the dark metal. The figure was spread-eagled, held in place by what looked like metal bands across the limbs and torso. "Admiral," Jun said, his voice carefully neutral. "What is that?" He pointed toward the figure. The other humans in the delegation followed his gaze, and he heard Lin's sharp intake of breath. Admiral Tanak moved beside him, all 6 eyes following Jun's outstretched hand. "Ah, you have good eyes, Commander Park. That is just a trophy from our conquest of the Lumine system." "A trophy?" Jun repeated, struggling to keep his expression neutral. "Yes, the daughter of their High Council." Tanak's mouth parts shifted in what Jun had learned was a gesture of pride. "She serves as a reminder to all who would oppose the Kreveshi Empire." The other humans exchanged uncomfortable glances. Lin stepped forward, diplomatic training evident in her smooth recovery. "Your military accomplishments are impressive, Admiral. The Kreveshi Empire's strength is why Earth seeks friendship between our peoples." But Jun couldn't take his eyes off the figure on the hull. The being, the woman, appeared to be in some sort of stasis. Her eyes were closed, face serene despite her horrific position. "Is she alive?" he asked carefully, unable to stop himself. Admiral Tanak turned all 6 eyes toward him. "Of course," he replied, his voice casual. "What glory is there in displaying the dead?" Jun felt his stomach twist, but kept his face blank. Years of military and diplomatic training had prepared him for surprising revelations, but nothing like this. He noticed the other members of the human delegation shifting uneasily. "The Lumine were a fascinating species," continued Tanak, apparently oblivious to the humans' discomfort. "Weak, but beautiful. They could communicate through light patterns in their skin. This one's father refused to surrender their central worlds. He changed his mind when we placed his daughter on our flagship." Jun stared at the figure, trying to comprehend the cruelty. The woman had been conscious when they put her there. Had she heard her father's pleas? Had she been awake when they strapped her to the hull? "How does she survive the vacuum?" asked Dr. Ree, the science officer, her voice strained but professional. Tanak gestured to another Kreveshi officer who stepped forward. "The stasis field preserves all biological functions," explained the officer. "It allows minimal consciousness while preventing aging or death. The field also protects against radiation and temperature extremes." "Minimal consciousness," Jun repeated softly. The woman was aware. She was experiencing this. "Yes, the trophy must know it is a trophy," said Tanak, as if explaining something obvious. Otherwise, the lesson is lost. June met the eyes of Captain Yoon, the senior military officer in their delegation. The captain's face was expressionless, but June knew him well enough to recognize the disgust in his eyes. "How many such trophies do you display?" asked Lin, her diplomatic training evident in her steady voice. "Each capital ship carries at least one," answered Tanak proudly. "It is a great honor for a commander to be granted a trophy. I have 2 on my flagship. 2 living beings strapped to the hull, aware for whom knew how long." June felt sick. "Would you like to see them up close?" offered Tanak. "We could take a shuttle around the exterior. The trophy's light patterns sometimes still activate when stimulated. Quite beautiful, really." "Perhaps another time," Lin interjected smoothly. "We still have much to discuss about the trade agreement." Tanak nodded. "Of course, this way to the command center." As the delegation moved to follow, Jun lingered for a moment, his eyes fixed on the distant figure. The woman's silver-blue skin caught the starlight, making her appear to glow faintly against the dark hull. Captain Hume paused beside him. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't what?" June asked quietly. "Whatever you're thinking, I can see it in your eyes." June turned to his superior. "You saw her, sir. A sentient being, conscious, used as a hood ornament." "I saw," Hume murmured. "But we have our orders. Earth needs this alliance." June looked back at the figure one last time. At what cost? As they walked to catch up with the others, June's mind was racing. The Crevashi were powerful, yes, but any civilization that treated sentient beings this way, could Earth really ally with them? What would that say about humanity? He thought of Earth's history, the long struggle against slavery and cruelty, the recognition of sentient rights that had eventually extended to the first non-human intelligences they'd encountered. Could they really sign a treaty with the Crevashi, knowing what they did to conquered peoples? June followed the delegation through the ship, his face a mask of diplomatic politeness, but inside, a plan was already forming. He didn't know how yet, but somehow he would find a way to help that woman, no matter the risk, no matter the cost to his career. Because some lines shouldn't be crossed, some acts couldn't be ignored, not even in the name of peace. Commander Jun Park couldn't sleep. The image of the woman strapped to the hull haunted him. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her silver-blue skin stretched against the cold metal of the Crevashi warship, imagined her awareness trapped in that frozen body. The delegation had returned to the Earth vessel Concordia 6 hours ago, but he hadn't found a moment's peace. He paced his small quarters, the metal floor cold beneath his bare feet. The room felt too confined, too similar to a prison cell, like her prison, suspended in space. His door chimed. "Come in," he called. Lieutenant Hannah Kim entered, her uniform crisp despite the late hour. She carried a data tablet under her arm and wore the concerned expression that had become familiar over their years serving together. "You should be resting, Commander," she said. "The treaty signing is in 14 hours. June ran a hand through his hair. "How can I rest when I know what's happening on those ships? When I know what we're about to align ourselves with?" Hannah sighed. "I've known you too long to believe you called me here just to vent. What are you planning?" June activated the privacy screen on his wall terminal. A soft hum filled the room as audio dampeners engaged, preventing any surveillance. "I can't just leave her there, Hannah," he said simply. Hannah's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. The Crevashi have technology decades beyond ours. Their military presence in this sector is overwhelming. I know the risks." "Do you? Because it sounds like you're considering an action that could not only end your career but potentially spark an interstellar incident." She placed her tablet on his desk with a sharp click. "The alliance with the Crevashi is crucial to Earth's security. If we interfere. If we don't, what does that say about us?" June countered, stopping his pacing to face her. "About humanity. It says we're practical. It says we put our people's safety first, at any cost, even our soul. Jun pressed a panel on his wall, revealing a hidden compartment. He removed a small data crystal and inserted it into his terminal. The screen flickered to life, displaying information about the Lumine, the species of the woman on the hull. While the Admiral was showing us their weapons systems, I accessed their database, Jun explained. Look at this. Images appeared, a beautiful crystalline city that seemed to glow from within. Beings with that same silver-blue skin, their bodies emitting soft patterns of light as they communicated. The Lumine were peaceful, Jun said quietly. They were artists, philosophers. Look at their cities, their culture. Hannah leaned closer, studying the images. And they're nearly extinct now, she murmured. The Crevashi didn't just defeat them in battle. They systematically destroyed their civilization. They took their leaders' children as trophies to force their surrender, then decimated their population anyway. He swiped to another screen showing star maps. There were once 17 Lumine colony worlds. Now there are 3 small outposts, with fewer than 10,000 survivors total. Hannah was silent for a long moment. Earth needs allies, Jun. You know the Garaxis hegemony has been pushing into our territory. And these are the allies we want. People who strap living beings to their ships and leave them conscious for decades, who commit genocide and display the survivors like hunting trophies. Jun brought up another image, a close-up scan of the woman on the hull. Even in stasis, her face showed a delicate beauty, with features that seemed almost luminous. I scanned her while we were on the observation deck, he said. The stasis field is sophisticated, but it's designed to preserve, not to hide. I got readings on her neural activity. He pointed to a series of spikes on a graph. She's dreaming, Hannah. She's in there, alive, thinking, feeling. Hannah closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her expression had hardened. It could mean war, she warned. It won't come to that. How can you possibly know that? Jun pulled up another screen, showing schematics of Crevashi ships. Because we're going to be smart about this. No direct confrontation. Hannah's eyebrows rose. We? I need your help, Hannah. And Jin's. The engineer. Jun, what are you planning? Something that won't be traced back to us, Jun replied. Something that looks like an accident. He brought up technical specifications for the stasis field. The Crevashi are proud, but they're also practical. If they lose a trophy due to what appears to be a technical malfunction, they won't risk an alliance over it. Hannah stared at the screen, then at Jun. He could see the conflict in her eyes. Duty versus ethics, safety versus right. If we're caught, she said slowly, it would be considered an act of sabotage, possibly even an act of war. I know. That's why I'm not ordering you to help me. I'm asking, as your friend. Hannah sank into the chair across from him. Tell me your plan. Jun brought up a schematic of both ships. Tomorrow, as part of the pre-treaty exchange, we're sending Jin and a team to the Crevashi flagship to help integrate our communication systems. Standard protocol. And the maintenance drones will need to scan the exterior hull to place relay nodes. Jin can modify one of the drones too. For the next hour, they refined the plan, identifying risks, developing contingencies. The more they talked, the more resolute Jun became. This wasn't just about saving one life. It was about what kind of people humans chose to be in this vast, often cruel universe. As dawn approached, Hannah finally nodded. I'm in. But if we're going to do this, we need to bring Dr. Min into the loop. We'll need medical support ready. Agreed. Jun stood, straightening his uniform. We have 6 hours before Jin departs for the Crevashi ship. Hannah moved toward the door, but paused before opening it. Jun, why this woman? There are others like her on other ships. We can't save them all. Jun looked at the image on his screen one last time before shutting it down. Because she's the one I saw. Because she's suffering now, and I can do something about it. He met Hannah's eyes, And because when we face some great wrong, we have to start somewhere. Hana nodded slowly. I'll talk to Jin. You get some rest. You'll need a clear head tomorrow. After she left, Jun lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since returning from the Kreveshi ship, the knot in his stomach had loosened. They might fail. They might be caught. But they would try. Because some things mattered more than safety. Some things were worth risking everything for. Tomorrow, they would attempt the impossible. Tonight, at least, he could sleep. Jin Lee had never felt his hands shake like this before. As the Concordia's chief engineer, he had performed delicate work in dangerous situations many times, but this was different. This wasn't repairing a damaged reactor core or rerouting power during an asteroid storm. This was deliberate sabotage against a militarily superior alien species. He sat in the small maintenance bay of the shuttle, fingers dancing across the control pad as he guided the drone toward the massive Kreveshi warship looming before them. The drone was standard Earth technology, nothing special, except for the modifications he had secretly made during the night. Approaching designated coordinates, Jin reported, his voice calm despite his racing heart. Through the drone's camera, he could see the gleaming hull of the Kreveshi ship growing larger. And there, just where Commander Park had said she would be, was the Lumine woman. Her silvery blue skin reflected the starlight, making her look like a sculpture rather than a living being. I have visual confirmation, Jin said into his communicator. Understood, came Hannah's voice from the shuttle's airlock, where she waited in an environmental suit. Standing by. Jin checked his timer. Officially, we're checking their shield compatibility. He murmured, more to steady himself than for the benefit of the others. 2 minutes until the cameras loop. He'd spent hours during the night creating a program that would feed the Kreveshi security systems a loop of normal drone activity. It would only work for 3 minutes, not long, but hopefully enough. The drone reached the hull of the ship, its sensors scanning the stasis field that kept the Lumine woman suspended between life and death. Jin frowned at the readings. The field is more complex than we thought, he said. It's integrated into her nervous system. Can you disrupt it safely? Hannah asked. Jin studied the data. I think so, but we'll need to be precise. Too much power could kill her. Too little won't break the connection. Do what you need to do, came Commander Park's voice through the communicator. He was on the bridge of the Kreveshi ship, supposedly discussing technical specifications with their command staff. Just make it quick. On the bridge of the Kreveshi warship, Jun fought to keep his expression interested as Admiral Tanak explained the finer points of their targeting systems. His uniform felt too tight, his mouth dry as he nodded at appropriate intervals. Your plasma cannons are impressive, Jun said, pointing to a display. The targeting resolution must be exceptional to achieve that accuracy. Admiral Tanak's 6 eyes blinked in what Jun had learned was an expression of pride. Indeed, we can target a specific component on an enemy vessel from 5,000 kilometers. Fascinating. And your defensive systems are equally advanced, I imagine. As the Admiral launched into another explanation, Jun's earpiece crackled softly. 30 seconds, came Jin's voice, barely audible. Jun needed to ensure all attention remained on him for the next few minutes. He pointed to another display. What about these readings? Your energy distribution seems unusually efficient. Back at the shuttle, Jin activated the final sequence. The timer on his display counted down. 10, 9, 8. Ready? He asked Hana. Ready, she confirmed from the airlock. Commander, Jin checked. Proceed. Jun's voice was calm, professional. Jin's voice came through Jun's earpiece. Now. Jin pressed the activation key. The modified drone, now hovering just inches from the Lumine woman, emitted a focused pulse of energy, calibrated to disrupt the stasis field without harming its prisoner. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the field flickered, a shimmer of energy washing over the Lumine woman's body. Jin guided the drone closer. From its underside extended specialized mechanical arms. Tools meant for delicate repair work, now repurposed for rescue. With surgical precision, they began detaching the metal bands that held the woman to the hull. First restraint released, Jin reported. Moving to the second. His fingers flew across the controls, the drone responding to his every command. One by one, the restraints came free. Arms, legs, torso. The woman's body floated slightly as the last restraint detached, held in place only by the drone's mechanical grip. Got her, Jin said, bringing her in. The drone slowly pulled away from the hull, carrying its precious cargo toward the waiting shuttle. Jin watched the distance counter tick down. 100 meters, 80 meters, 60 meters. Life signs, he asked. In the airlock, Hannah monitored the readings from her suit's sensors, detecting minimal life functions. Heartbeat extremely slow but present. Neural activity minimal. Will she survive transport? Unknown, but we have to try. The drone reached the shuttle's open airlock. Hannah, tethered securely, reached out with gloved hands as the drone transferred the Lumine woman to her. Life signs stable, Hannah reported as they secured the unconscious figure in a medical pod they had prepared. But barely. Her system is in shock from the stasis disruption. The pod sealed with a soft hiss, internal systems activating to maintain life support. Hannah worked quickly, attaching monitoring devices, administering the treatments Dr. Min had prepared. Subject secured, Hannah reported. Drone returning tow. A red light flashed on Jin's console. Energy spike detected. The shuttle's computer announced. External scan in progress. Jin's blood ran cold. Kreveshi sensors detected something, he warned. They're scanning the area. On the bridge of the Kreveshi ship, a junior officer approached Admiral Tanak, speaking in their native language. June didn't need a translation to understand that something had alerted their systems. The Admiral turned all 6 eyes toward him. Commander Park, our sensors have detected unusual energy readings near the hull. Would your people know anything about this? Jun maintained a puzzled expression. What kind of readings? We have a maintenance drone checking shield compatibility. Standard procedure before communication integration. The readings are consistent with a stasis field disruption, the Admiral said, suspicion evident in his voice. Jun's heart raced. Deploy the decoy, he murmured into his communicator, disguising the words with a cough. He straightened his uniform. Admiral, with respect, Earth technology sometimes creates unusual readings. Perhaps we should check with my engineer. In the shuttle, Jin activated the second drone, their insurance policy. The decoy drone shot away from the shuttle, emitting the same energy signature as the first, but headed in the opposite direction. Decoy away, Jin reported, creating false readings 500 meters from the trophy position. The decoy drone accelerated, its energy signature growing stronger, more erratic, like a malfunctioning piece of equipment. On the Kreveshi bridge, an officer called out, Admiral, the anomalous readings are moving away from the ship. Energy signature increasing. Interesting, said Jun, frowning at the display as if confused. That's not normal behavior for our drones. It appears to be malfunctioning, the Admiral observed, still suspicious, but now watching the decoy's progress. Jun said into his communicator, keeping his voice normal as if speaking to his engineer about routine matters. We're reading unusual activity from maintenance drone beta. Can you explain? Checking, Commander, Jin replied, his voice coming through the bridge speakers. Yes, I see it. There's a power fluctuation in its primary systems. I'm attempting to override. The decoy drone suddenly flared brightly, then went dark, the self-destruct sequence Jin had programmed. Lost contact with the drone, Jin reported. It appears to have suffered a catastrophic power failure. The Admiral's attention was fully on the disappeared drone now. Your equipment seems unreliable, Commander Park. Jun allowed himself to look embarrassed. My apologies, Admiral. I assure you, this is unusual. We'll conduct a full investigation." In the shuttle, Hana and Jin exchanged looks of relief as the Cravashi sensors focused on the decoy's last position. "It worked," Hana whispered. "They took the bait." The medical pod hummed quietly, its occupant still unconscious but alive. For the first time, in what might have been decades, the Lumine woman was free. Jin began the shuttle's return sequence. "Mission accomplished," he said softly. "Let's bring her home." Dr. Soo Kim checked the readings on the medical pod for the 20th time that hour. For 3 days, she had monitored the Lumine woman's vital signs, watching as her body slowly awakened from decades of forced stasis. The process was delicate. Too rapid a revival could send her into shock. Too slow, and her consciousness might not fully return. "Neural activity increasing again," Dr. Kim noted, speaking into her medical recorder. "Autonomic functions stabilizing. Remarkable resilience considering the extended stasis period." She adjusted the environmental controls in the pod, increasing the temperature slightly. The Lumine homeworld had been warmer than Earth standard, according to the limited data Commander Park had acquired. Beside her, Nurse Jun monitored the woman's unique biological readings. "Doctor, look at this," he said, pointing to a display showing patterns of light traveling beneath the woman's silver-blue skin. "It's like electrical impulses, but different." "The Lumine communicate partially through bioluminescence," Dr. Kim explained. "Those patterns may indicate returning consciousness." As if in response to her words, the patterns intensified. The woman's skin began to pulse with gentle blue light, rippling in waves across her slender form. "She's waking up," Nurse Jun whispered. Dr. Kim pressed the communication panel. "Medical to Commander Park. Our patient is regaining consciousness." Inside the pod, the Lumine woman's eyelids fluttered. Her eyes opened slowly, large, luminous orbs with no visible pupils, just swirling patterns of silver against pale blue. She blinked several times, her gaze unfocused. Dr. Kim carefully opened the pod. "Can you understand me?" she asked gently. The woman's head turned toward the sound, her movements stiff and uncertain. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. "Take your time," Dr. Kim said. "You're safe here." The woman swallowed, her throat working visibly. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough from disuse, but clear. "Where am?" she asked in halting universal standard, the trading language used throughout the sector. "You're safe," said Dr. Kim. "On a human vessel. The Concordia." The woman's eyes widened, more light patterns flickering across her skin. "Not Cravashi." "No. We removed you from their ship 3 days ago." The woman tried to sit up, her movements awkward and jerky. Nurse Jun helped support her, adjusting the bed to a reclining position. "I am Neri," she said, placing a hand over her chest. "Daughter of High Counselor Talon of Lumine Prime." Her voice grew stronger with each word, as if remembering how to use it. "I have been aware for 27 cycles. Unable to move. Unable to die." Dr. Kim felt a chill at the woman's words. 27 cycles, nearly 30 Earth years, conscious but paralyzed, displayed like a hunting trophy on the hull of a warship. "Nari," she said softly, "I'm Dr. Soo Kim. This is Nurse Jun. We've been caring for you since your rescue." "Rescue," Nari repeated the word as if testing it. "I had stopped hoping." Taking a deep breath, Jinna extended her hand. Palm up, fingers slightly curled in the formal Valaxian gesture of controlled contact. "I invite any council member to test whether a human can shield or share thoughts by choice." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Such a challenge was unheard of. After a tense moment, Elder Tolvin slowly rose from his seat and approached Jinna. "You understand what you are proposing?" he asked quietly. Jinna nodded. "I do, Elder." With ceremonial slowness, Tolvin placed his upper right limb against Jinna's palm. His antennae immediately stiffened in shock. "Impossible," he whispered. Jinna closed her eyes, focusing as she'd been taught. first projecting the simple image, Earth's moon rising over mountains, then withdrawing it behind mental barriers. When she opened her eyes, the entire council was leaning forward, antennae rigid with attention. "The human controls her thoughts," Tolvin announced. "She shares or shields at will, with discipline equal to our adepts." The chamber erupted in clicking and whistling as council members debated among themselves. Jinnah returned to her seat beside Reltak, whose antennae were moving in a pattern she'd never seen before. "What you just did," he said softly, "will change everything." "For better or worse?" Jinnah asked. "That remains to be seen," Reltak replied. "But you have demonstrated what some of us have argued for generations, that control, not restriction, is the true path forward." As they left the council chamber, Jinnah noticed younger Valaxians watching her with their antennae vibrating in what she recognized as excitement. Word of her demonstration was already spreading. "I may have just made your position more difficult," she said to Reltak. "The conservative council members won't appreciate this challenge." Reltak's antennae moved in what Jinnah now recognized as his equivalent of a smile. "Perhaps, but you have done what no Valaxian could, questioned our oldest traditions from a position no one can dismiss." "Because I'm an outsider." "Because you are the variable no one anticipated," Reltak corrected. "Neither fully bound by our traditions, nor ignorant of them. You stand between worlds, exactly where change begins." The warning came at night. Jinnah was reviewing cultural exchange proposals when Reltak burst into her quarters, his normally orderly movements sharp with urgency. "You must leave immediately," he said, his translator barely keeping up with his rapid clicks. "Take only what you need." Jinnah stood quickly, recognizing genuine alarm in his posture. "What's happening?" "The traditionalist faction has made its move. 6 council members have been detained. They're calling for the removal of all human influence." Reltak's antennae trembled. "Your demonstration last month catalyzed something we didn't anticipate." Over the 5 months since Jinnah had demonstrated human mental shielding to the council, Valaxian society had begun changing rapidly. Younger Valaxians openly questioned touch protocols. Lower castes demanded reforms. The conservative noble houses had grown increasingly alarmed. "Where would I go?" Jinnah asked, grabbing her emergency pack. "The Earth Embassy." "Too obvious. They'll search there first." Reltak moved to a wall panel and pressed a complex sequence. A hidden door slid open. "This leads to the old tunnel network beneath the city. My aide Senval will guide you to sanctuary with the Reform Coalition." Jinnah hesitated. "What about you? Won't your enemies target you for supporting me?" "My house has ancient protections they cannot easily overcome." Reltak's compound eyes seemed to soften. "But you've become more than a diplomatic arrangement to me, Jinnah. I cannot risk your safety." This was the closest Reltak had ever come to expressing personal feelings. Jinnah felt a complicated mix of emotions, surprise, concern, and something warmer she wasn't ready to name. "I won't run and hide while reformers who supported me are in danger," she said firmly. "That's not how humans handle crisis, nor how Valaxians should." A new voice clicked from the doorway. Elder Tolvin entered, moving with surprising speed for one so ancient. "The High Emissariat is right about the danger, but wrong about the solution." "Elder," Reltak acknowledged with respect. "The traditionalists have 7 battle carriers in orbit. They've blockaded the spaceport, and in doing so, have violated our oldest laws about military deployment without full council approval," Tolvin replied. "They act out of fear, not wisdom." Jinnah looked between them. "What are you suggesting?" "The Grand Assembly," Tolvin said simply. "It has not been convened in 12 generations, but in times of constitutional crisis, any elder can call for it. The assembly of all Valaxian castes," Reltak explained for Jinnah's benefit. "Even the traditionalists wouldn't dare ignore that summons." "And I'm calling it now," Tolvin said, his antennae set in determination. "In 3 days, all factions must appear and make their case before the entire population." Jinnah understood the magnitude of this move. The traditionalists will use it to demand human removal from Valaxian space. Yes, Tolvin agreed. And you will use it to show our people a better path forward. 3 days later, Jinnah stood in an ancient amphitheater carved into the side of a mountain. Hundreds of thousands of Valaxians filled the stone seats, with millions more watching remotely. The air hummed with tension as representatives from every caste and faction took their ceremonial positions. "This is unprecedented," Nayun whispered beside her. "Humans have never witnessed a grand assembly." Jinnah nodded, trying to project calm despite her racing heart. She wore a formal Earth diplomatic uniform modified with symbols of her status as Reltak's consort, a carefully chosen political statement. The proceedings began with ritual declarations from each faction. The traditionalists spoke first, led by council member Mevkar. "Our ancient ways are under attack," he clicked, his translator broadcasting to all present. "Foreign influence threatens the very foundations of our society. The human presence has already led to chaos, with youth abandoning proper touch protocols and lower castes demanding privileges beyond their station." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Mevkar detailed the human contamination of Valaxian culture. Jinnah listened carefully, noting which arguments resonated with the audience. When the Reform Coalition spoke, represented by a younger noble named Vintra, they emphasized adaptation rather than abandonment of tradition. "Our species has always evolved," Vintra argued. "The touch protocols were created to protect, not to divide. As our telepathic abilities change, shouldn't our customs adapt as well?" The debate continued for hours, growing increasingly heated. Jinnah watched the crowd's reactions, noticing how the younger Valaxians responded positively to reform arguments, while the older ones clicked in disapproval. Finally, Elder Tolvin rose. "As is tradition in the Grand Assembly, we call upon the catalyst of our current situation to speak. Lieutenant Commander Jinnah, diplomatic consort to the 7th House, you may address the Assembly." A hush fell as Jinnah walked to the central speaking platform. She had prepared carefully for this moment, but facing hundreds of thousands of alien eyes still tested her diplomatic training. "People of Valaxia," she began, her voice steady, "I stand before you as both outsider and consort, neither fully separate from your society nor fully part of it." She paused, letting her translator catch up. "The traditionalists fear I represent a threat to your way of life. Their concern is understandable. Change is always frightening, especially when it comes from outside." Jinnah activated a small device, projecting ancient Valaxian script into the air above her. "But I have studied your oldest texts in your great archive. With Elder Tolvin's guidance, I've read the original touch laws from the Third Age." She gestured to the floating text. "These are not the words of those who feared change. These are the words of those who sought protection and connection." The amphitheater was completely silent now, all antennae focused on the ancient words few living Valaxians had ever seen. "Your ancestors wrote, 'The rituals exist that minds may touch in harmony, not discord.' They created protocols to enable safe connection, not to prevent it." Jinnah looked directly at Mevkar. "They sought to build bridges between minds, not walls." Jinnah then did something unprecedented. She removed her protective gloves, a violation of diplomatic protocol that caused gasps throughout the crowd. "I am human. My mind works differently than yours. Yet with training, I learned to control what thoughts I share through touch." She extended her bare hand. "This is not a threat to your culture. It's evidence that connection can exist with protection through skill, not just through separation." Mevkar rose immediately. "This display proves our point. The human flaunts our most sacred traditions for theatrical effect." "No," Jinnah countered. "I honor the true spirit of your traditions by showing that their purpose, safe mental connection, can be achieved through means your ancestors couldn't have foreseen." She gestured toward the younger Valaxians. "Your youth aren't rejecting your culture. They're asking why protocols designed for protection have become tools of division. Why touch allowed freely within noble houses is forbidden between castes. Why laws created to prevent harm now prevent growth. A young Valaxian suddenly stood from the lower seating area. A serious breach of protocol. She speaks truth. The protocols were meant to protect, not separate. Guards moved toward the youth, but others stood in support. Soon dozens, then hundreds of younger Valaxians were standing, their antennae vibrating in agreement. Mevkar clicked in outrage. This is the chaos the human has brought. Look at this disrespect for our sacred traditions. Is it disrespect to question? Reltak spoke for the first time, his voice carrying authority. Our greatest scientific and cultural advances came from those who asked why, not those who said never. Elder Tolvin raised his limbs for silence. When the crowd quieted, he spoke with the weight of his position. I have served 12 high councils. I have studied our history longer than most here have lived. And I tell you now, the human speaks truth about our past. He moved to stand beside Jinnah. The touch laws were created as tools for connection, not barriers to it. Over generations, we forgot their purpose and remembered only their form. Jinnah felt the momentum shifting. Countless antennae throughout the amphitheater were moving in patterns of consideration and agreement. I do not ask you to abandon your traditions, she said. I ask only that you remember why they began. Protection through skill and understanding, not separation and fear. She took a data crystal from her pocket, one containing her research on Valaxian history alongside human cultural information. Humans and Valaxians are different species with different minds, but both our peoples value knowledge, protection, and connection. Both our cultures have changed over time. This is not weakness. It's adaptation. It's survival. Jinnah placed the crystal on the central pedestal where all could see it. I offer this knowledge freely to all castes, not just the nobles. Let each Valaxian decide for themselves what traditions serve the future and which belong to the past. This was her most radical proposal, information sharing outside the caste system. For a moment, the amphitheater was completely silent. Then, slowly, Elder Tolvin placed his upper right limb on the crystal, a formal gesture of acceptance. Reltak joined him, then Vintra. One by one, representatives from every faction, except the hardline traditionalists, added their acknowledgement. The Grand Assembly has witnessed, Tolvin announced formally. The path of knowledge stands open to all castes. The Reform Coalition will oversee changes to the touch protocols, preserving their protective purpose while removing unnecessary restrictions. Jinnah stood in disbelief as the amphitheater erupted in clicking and whistling. Approval from thousands of Valaxians. What had begun as a diplomatic crisis had somehow transformed into a turning point for an entire civilization. Later, as they left the amphitheater, Reltak's antennae moved in a pattern Jinnah had never seen before. What does that mean? She asked, exhausted but elated. There is no human translation, he replied. The closest would be pride, but deeper. You have done something no Valaxian could have done. I just reminded them of their own history, Jinnah said.